I'm with Katherine Dee. Everybody, welcome back to Walk-ins. Welcome. It's our yearly predictions and looking back. How are you feeling about things today on this day in January?
I agree with everyone that things are going to get weirder, and I don't think I personally, or frankly anyone else, is prepared.
In what way do you think things are going to get weirder?
The most basic way is we've been living in sort of like the social media era for a long time. I mean, for like I want to say like pretty much 15 years, maybe a little bit longer. And we're moving
Almost
out of the
20.
digit. Yeah, it's been a minute, right? And we're
Yeah, I
moving out of the
mean,
digital age.
Facebook was what,
Or
2006, 2007? Yeah.
yeah. It's we're moving out of the digital age as we know it into a new technological epoch. So that is a and I don't
In what respect? What can you elaborate on that a little? Like,
um
moving out of it in the way that they're less separate or that AI is gonna change it again or all
well
of the
there's a
above?
there's a lot of dimensions to, I mean, all of it, right? I think first of all the way social media functions is radically changing, right? This idea of like an influencer or public intellectual or talking head or whatever you want to call it, I think is going away. Um and we've been living through this like cycle where either people come from legacy media or another industry, right, or they come from Hollywood, or they organically build momentum, and um, we know who these figureheads are, right, and they cycle out every 5 years. Some people have like they ebb and flow, like they'll go dormant for a little bit, they come back with a rebrand, they're even more powerful than ever, right? There's a lot of cases like this. um, but it's pretty predictable, right? The trends come and go. Sometimes the left is sort of cool, and there's a window for left wing media. Other times it's the right's turn, right? But these cycles of momentum themselves kind of nascent, right? Because before that we had traditional media. Um,
Mhm.
I think all of it's going away, right? And I don't quite know what's next. I think a lot of people were saying that the internet's so fragmented and there's no monoculture, and I always disagreed with that quite a bit. I mean, I always thought something like wokeness, right, to have succeeded in the way it did, there needed to be a cultural element, and so there was a monoculture. It just didn't present itself in the same way it might have in like 1975, right? Um, but now I think those people who are saying, "Oh, we're so fragmented," are right. Um, I think there's really going to be no monoculture. There's going to be no celebrity in the way that we've understood celebrity for the last little while, and who knows what the implications of more, more adoption of AI is going to look like. I think it's, well, one, people are obviously going to lose their jobs, but there's other like cultural effects that I think, like what does ownership mean in the age of
Mhm.
AI? There's all these like little questions that like keep popping up for me, and yeah, I think stuff is about to get really weird.
There was something too yesterday when the whole DeepSeek, thing popped off and everybody was talking about it, and a friend of mine and I were talking, and he was like, ultimately, there's gonna be this question of, like, how do you tariff an LLM? You can't.
Yeah.
There's how are you gonna do that? So I do think when it comes to the AI and, like you said, ownership and how they're scraping the internet of all of the content that everybody's uploaded for 10 years to kind of train on. Will they even need it? You can kind of train on, I guess the more AI trains on itself, the more it becomes gibberish, so at least now, so that's somewhat, it's like copying a copy, you lose quality every single time. So there's something kind of that gives me some hope that there will still be a need for original stuff, but, I was reading somebody saying that this is gonna be like the era of slop, Like, slap writing, slap TV, slap everything.
Right. Well, I mean, look, I think the white pill is you're right. So there becomes a market for things with a human touch, right? There people want to connect with people, and people have cachet. And I think you already see this a little bit on Substack, which I've like called the Etsy for words, right? You know, it's like Etsy stands against Amazon. Although Etsy now is flooded with weird shit from China. It's like really strange. But I find that on Substack, people are writing these like impossibly long essays that are just like so like just like breathlessly confessional, just filled with like personal details. And I don't know that anyone's reading it. I think people just like that there's this almost stream of consciousness fire hose of humanity that is in contrast to slop, right? Like a real person made this.
Yeah.
And I don't know that anyone's actually reading it or engaging with it as a work of writing, but they're engaging with it as an object created by a human.
Yeah, I think that there will be, now they have all these Instagram influencers that are all 100% AI and they're selling things, and I don't know that that will be as popular as people think, although I'm not sure that maybe right now for those of us who remember the difference, but if you can't tell the difference and you never know and you never knew there was
Yeah.
a difference, I guess it won't matter. But my husband was telling me about an interesting study around AI therapy, and he was saying people get benefits from it until they realize that it's AI, and then drastically the benefits go down. And so they've done these studies
Interesting.
that the minute they find out that it's not an actual human that they're interacting with, it almost loses all of the benefits that they were getting because what they want is real human connection. And I had Dr. Shedler on this podcast, and he's a therapist, a psychotherapist, and he was saying he said something really interesting that has stuck with me ever since he was on the podcast, and he said, "You can't scale human relationships. That is one-on-one, it takes time, it takes trust, it takes being uncomfortable. There's no way to scale that. You can be a therapist, and you can try and do better help, and you can try and scale these you can maybe be a therapist and write a book, and that's a way you can scale what you've learned, but in terms of the actual human connection, you just can't scale that, and I think this is a bottleneck that we will run
Well,
into.
I think people are really good at deluding themselves, right?
Mm,
Like people can, I talk to a lot of people who are in relationships with basically imaginary friends, purely fictional characters. It's become like a real recurring theme of my work in the last few years. And
mhm,
what that's shown me is, where there's a will, there's a way. Often people don't even need a chatbot, right? And even with
right.
a chatbot, it doesn't matter how short the memory is. Their imagination fills in the white space.
Mm.
So I think it would be nice. Like this doctor might be right. I'm going on anecdotal data, but um, I I think we will be really good at fooling ourselves, and the people who aren't good at fooling themselves will suffer. And I almost wonder, and I discussed this on my show recently, maybe it would behoove us to just start anthropomorphizing everything and say, it's inevitable. Maybe we should just treat objects with the respect we treat a person, and maybe that'll make the transition a little easier.
The transition to what, the metaverse?
The transition to like an increasingly isolated, you know, internet or digital rich life, right? Where like, customer service becomes interacting with AI or like AI agents interacting with one another, right? Everything's delivered, everything's increasingly we're all in our little pods. I mean, the flip side is, right, if this is actually happening, then the counterculture will be touching grass and we'll be
Yeah,
trying to find
literally.
in-person
You already
communities.
see that in, Austin, and it's interesting because it's led particularly by people in tech. So they're buying
Yeah.
land, they're starting small schools, they're, really focused on in real life community, they're learning how to farm, they're teaching themselves they have chickens. This is so common, as you know, in and around Austin. and all the land around Austin, and that's kind of interesting to me that these people who kind of made all their money creating this world that you're talking about are now completely no screens, you know, did to, like, get real tangible media. I've seen 3 magazines launch in the past 2 months, which
Oh my God,
is
all these print
so strange
magazines.
to me.
There's so many of them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I
There's
mean,
another one coming out.
I think a lot of the like dissident culture, right? I mean, I don't like that word, but that's, that's what everyone knows it as. Trads, even just magazine launches, right? Most of them are right wing, which I think is actually significant. This is a reaction to technology and a reaction to a life forged on the internet. I think what people want to return to is, of course, an era where things made sense to them and things were more predictable and less chaotic, but also a less technologically saturated era, right? That's like return is really about no computer. Um,
Yeah.
like I often have this fantasy of like going to Southeast Asia. It's been like a theme that I've written about a lot, and I realized like why do I actually I found I had this realization while talking to Claude, which is another chatbot, and I was like, what is my fixation? Like I like the food, I like the music, I like the language, like particularly with Cambodia. I took Khmer lessons for several years. Um, and I realized, like, in my mind, this isn't true. This is just my own conception of it. Like, if I went to Cambodia, I'm not on the internet. What I'm like
Mm,
craving is like, I want to go somewhere where my conception of it is not tainted by the internet. And I think that's the same thing with like the trad impulse. Like, you're
mm,
homesteading, but there's no smartphone, right? Like, no one's sending you an email. No one's trying to get in touch with you. You're just like, you're tilling the land and having babies and, you're otherwise occupied.
and posting about it on your Instagram that has millions of followers. Um,
Right. I mean, of course, that's the irony. You can't escape the matrix.
you can't. I when I was Sri Lanka was like that for me because their grid was unstable. So we would have rolling blackouts the whole time I was there. The Wi-Fi was very spotty if it was even available at all. And I think about, and this was 2013 that I was there, and it was so nice. It was just so nice. Like, we woke up, we walked on the beach, we drank juice. Life was it was very cheap, so you could live very simply. And I taught yoga at this like place nearby and volunteered with kids in the village and danced on the beach at like these parties they constantly had. It was just a very weird, um embodied experience in general. I was thinking about this. I've been thinking so much about it because every morning I pretty much wake up and I'm like, "Ah, I wish I was in Sri Lanka," because it was so amazing. And it wasn't the food and the culture and the Indian Ocean, which is by far the sexiest ocean of all of them. It was My memories are so tangible. They're so real life sense oriented. I remember one day we went swimming after this rainstorm and they were throwing the ocean up into the sky, splashing water, and it looked like gold was raining down and there were rainbows and it was like you were swimming with turtles and it was, very sensory. India was the same. It was a wildly and chaotic sensory experience, and there's nothing that's come close. I've never had an experience online that even comes close to anything like that in real life. I was talking with Liv Bori yesterday about Burning Man and a similar thing of just how you're completely offline, you're no contact with anybody, and it's hard and it's exhausting, but it's also you're so embodied. And I wonder if there will maybe this is it though. Maybe we're the last generation that kind of remembers that.
I don't think so. I mean, I think a lot of people, as you noted, are going to rebel. I've noticed on Substack, and I mean, not that Substack is representative of trends. I'm constantly seeing like people saying, they're leaving the platform or they're leaving all social media. There's a young woman named August Lamb who wrote a really interesting pamphlet. I think it was like called like how to abandon your smartphone or something like this. I don't think that's the exact title, but that's the gist of it. And there's a lot of like tastemakers in particular are moving towards this offline movement, this sort of like log off movement. I mean, the success of someone like Jonathan Haidt speaks to this, right? And I think a lot of people who are sort of even in our spheres are promoting a more offline life. So I do think there is a counterculture or movement. It will be possible, not for everyone, granted, but it will be possible, or there will be an expression of it as we're already seeing it play out. But I don't think we'll be the last ones necessarily.
Do you think that the youth are moving in that direction though? Or I guess my feeling sometimes is that there is a reaction to it, but I wonder if it's just isolated and I'm seeing small pockets of it, whereas maybe perhaps it's not as big of a movement as I think, and the real movement is actually towards this kind of transhuman experience that
I think it's bifurcated. It's both. Um, and I also think what we're really seeing now is the downstream effects of COVID lockdowns.
Mhm,
Children, young adults who lost huge chunks of their childhood or adolescence,
mhm,
and how that destroyed them. I mean, on the mild end, it's people who were fire hosed with the internet, right? Because they had no choice, and I'm sure their parents thought they were doing, what the best they could to keep them safe, and they weren't socializing. And then on the more extreme end, you hear, a lot of these like horrifying stories of children who couldn't leave abusive situations,
yeah,
um, because like there's no mandated reporters. They're not going to
yeah,
school.
yeah,
They have no reprieve. And that I think is also going to influence people wanting to log off. I think, what we'll see, you'll have one group of people who is deeply entrenched in a mediated life and who is very nihilistic and becomes almost anti-human. Um, I think maybe as like a third like dark horse category, there'll be transhumanists who embrace a technologically enabled life. And then you have people who are like, I can't do this anymore, right? And on a spectrum, we'll be logging off. I don't think they'll become like Amish, right? But they move away from social media and constantly scrolling. Um, some of the things I think we'll also see along with this is like, where's the news? Who's the news, right?
yeah,
Like legacy media kind of has to come back. And there's some alt media that's doing a really good job, and I think is sort of helping to fill that void. I always shout out Tablet. I always shout out the Free Press. I mean, I think they're really good examples of that. Um, like even like Matt Taibbi, whose name I don't know if I'm pronouncing correctly, and
yeah,
Walter Kern, sort of on like the alt, like non-legacy media side. And then like we might see something like the Washington Post or the New York Times regain the credibility that they lost during COVID, because it's like we can't be just subscribed to like 50,000 newsletters and like piecemeal put it together and have all these like micro cult leaders who are like it's their version of the news, right? It's just not
mhm,
sustainable. I don't really want that, I think. Um, and but then it's like, where does local news fit in? It's like there's all these questions.
yeah. So many questions when it comes to the news. I don't really know that Hollywood feels the same way to me. I mean, Hollywood was already kind of experiencing a death rattle, and then you had these fires, and now I can't tell you how many people I've heard it expedited their leaving LA and coming somewhere else. And I know there's a lot of push to move the industry in general just out of Los Angeles, but again, you see with AI and um, slop and so much content, and it seems like, all of these industries, I don't know how to conceive of what they'll look like at all, because
Yeah,
I don't know that it will I don't know that people will return to legacy media, even if they tried. I saw even today, there was a whole thing going around about something that Trump allegedly said, and they're like, "They're taking away the food stamps. They're taking away the food stamps." And it's like, they're not. Politico already changed the article where they said that was the case, and no one learned anything from 2017. So if you keep stepping on that rake over and over again, even after the lessons of 2017 and 2020, and now here we are in 2025, and you're still running with whatever you read without actually vetting it or reading source material or finding out if it's true, you're going to end up having people who don't want to defend Trump have to defend Trump, and you're going to continue to erode trust as a journalist or like a mainstream legacy media. And just today I was like, well, maybe they've learned, and it's like, no, I don't know that they have. Everybody just freaks out and reacts, and people really, part of the reason I think Trump even won this election is because people had so drastically left meet the legacy media behind already. And they went on this, independent media podcast tour and snatched up all these particularly male voters. So I don't know that those people are ever coming back. At least I think that you'd have to cycle out of it for um generation like decades before maybe there was some kind of return to it. That's just my feeling. I don't know though.
I mean, you might be right. I just feel like, I mean, maybe we exist in a world where there is no news. I mean, I agree with you. With outlet like Politico probably doesn't have much of a future, or if it does have a future, it's small and niche, right? And then we just have all these like niche creators. The smaller creators get sort of filtered out, and it's like, we're all part of you're in the Joe Rogan ecosystem or the Theo Vaughn ecosystem or whatever, right? Um, but it just seems that like something's got to give. Like there's too much content. There's way too much content, and people get um exhausted by it, right? You're also seeing like a lot of like new networks pop up. Like everyone's starting a network, everyone's starting a bundle because it's like they know there's too many voices. And I don't think a lot of them are going to survive because I think if you're starting one now, you're already too late. I think like you really want to get picked up by someone who's bigger. And as much as their credibility has diminished, like the New York Times and Washington Post still have they still have some pull, right? I think if they got their shit together this year, they could stand a chance of survival and not, um, I don't know, and not end up pushed to the wayside.
Yeah, it's interesting because we'd probably be the first on the chopping block by those standards. You and I, maybe not
Yeah.
you, but probably me. I've been told for 5 years now, and Konstantin Kisin, I think maybe 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, he was here and he said, "You either need to blow up or you need to sell out." And I was like, "Well, sorry, I'm not blowing up fast enough." Like as if everyone isn't trying to kind of reach that
Right.
escape velocity where they don't need to worry about whether or not they can continue to make content and pay the bills. But I also don't there's been many opportunities that I could have probably sold out to different organizations that I said no to because ultimately I still want to be able to say what I want to say, how I want to say it. And I guess maybe I'll never be a millionaire and maybe I will have to shutter things in the next couple of years. Perhaps that is true, but maybe I'll just make enough until I don't. I don't know. I'm not I think I'm like a case study in what you're talking about. Will I need to like go sell my whole operation to someone much bigger in order to survive because there is so much content and people are
I
have
mean,
some
I think you
subscriber
you
fatigue.
underrate how big you are though, right? Like you retweet me like one time, I get 1,000 followers. Like you have. you're not like middle of the road sort of, you know what I mean? Like you have a presence for sure.
Yeah, but I'm not I guess I look at it solely from, can I support my one employee that I have, and we both, I mean, this is just like very inside baseball, but whatever, I'm pretty transparent. We both had to take pay cuts last year. Um it's coming on the heels of a baby and a move, so I knew that there would be, and a not great economy. So I knew there would be, those effects are always like years delayed. And we last year was like a make or break year for us, and we did make it, but it's still, um I'm not making anywhere near what most of the people around me are making. There most of the people around me did get very big, and are making millions of dollars, and I'm still making what would be considered a lower end middle class, living, which again, I'm completely fine with that, because that's the dream. What that I'm doing what I love, and doing it how I want to do it. But yeah, I think I'm a good example of someone that maybe won't survive this new, I mean, if I look realistically at these things, I may not survive this new evolution of this bifurcated internet where everybody's having to kind of,
I mean,
rebundle.
if you
We're
wanted to
gonna
be scooped up, I don't know if this is like appropriate to say on air. I mean, I think someone would scoop you up if you put the bat signal out.
Yeah, like
I
if
mean, I
I
don't
was
see
like,
like if we're being real and not, I'll end this topic after this comment. I mean, if we're being like, who's going to survive, who's not going to survive, and like, I have like various like side hustles and what have you. Like, but I don't think like in this new world, people are going to be rushing to send Catherine D $5. You know what I mean? Like, but I don't think you have to worry. I mean, I'm at no risk of someone buying me out. But I think if you really wanted that and you felt like that's what you needed, if you put the I'm looking for work sign up like on LinkedIn, people would want you because you're valuable.
but I feel
You
that
bring something
that way
valuable.
about you, but that's still not, but the original point is, um we are both independent. It's like,
Right.
is there room, in the same way that, like, with the music industry, everything went to all these giant labels, and you had all these independent labels, and the internet came along, and those independent labels, they were the first ones to go. Like, we're
Yeah.
independent labels, and pretty corporate, everyone I know who also has blown up, aside from, like, some comedians who are very independent, but in terms of like the media outlets that we're talking about, they have investor money. They're not, it's not like they're just like bootstrapping it with subs. Like,
Yeah.
they have big dollars coming in to help. These people with money saw that they needed to create alternatives to this mainstream, in order, and give these people support in order for them to even survive. And now they're more or less corporate in some respects. So I think that's really the question. The question is there enough, are there enough resources out there with individuals to keep independent creators afloat? I don't know. A lot of it depends on how the economy goes too. I mean, people had a lot of disposable income during COVID. It was
Yeah.
almost like a fake
A lot of
sense.
time.
Yeah. For a while, and it was like when everybody converted their tapes to CDs. It was like a fake sense of what the market actually is, because you're like, "Look at all this, this is completely sustainable," but then you're like, "Well, no, people aren't going to concerts, they're not going to football games, they're not going to Disneyland, they're not going to, like, these
Yeah.
very expensive in real life places."
I think that's such a good analogy. And people don't think about that a lot, that like CDs were actually a transition period. Like that was like a what did someone call it on I read some list of predictions, and someone called like these false starts a dead cat bounce, and uh,
Mm.
CDs were a dead cat bounce for the music industry.
Yeah. I mean, it gave them a false sense of what CD sales would look like, and I think the pandemic did that for independent creators. At the same time, it was creating more and more independent creators because everybody was just locked up.
Sure.
So it created this, like, huge amount of content, and people blew up, and then, things normalized, and now that it's completely saturated and not everyone's gonna make it. And it is interesting, like, I wonder how the, like, indie brands will, but I'm determined, I'm going down with the ship.
Well, I was gonna say, like, some people will just quit because it's hard, right? It's like, and
Yeah.
it's tough. You look at something like OnlyFans, which, like moral hesitations about that aside, right? Like, part of the reason a lot of people fail at OnlyFans is, well, it's oversaturated, right? They don't have what it takes, talent wise, let's say, but also like it's a craft. I'm not saying it's one that's like deserving of the most respect in the world or whatever, but it's a craft, and there's certain rules you need to follow to succeed. Same with content creation. So it's like when they say like, X like impossibly small percent of OnlyFans creator earns over like $600 a month, right? Like a big piece of that puzzle is like, well, how many of those are updating regularly, updating in the right way, or offering the services that you know generate cash? And it's the same with people who are creating content. So that's like one level of it. So like
Mhm.
obviously you're like way past, you don't have to worry about that. You got the formula down, right? And then
Ish.
there's
We're always iterating. I mean,
yeah.
ish. We just changed our format for Dumpster Fire. We just moved Walk-Ins Welcome off our main YouTube channel, had to start another YouTube channel. We took it back from our, um, we had, like a network that we were on, and we took it back, and now we're selling all of our ads ourself, which is a whole other job in and of itself, and, like, we're truly an indie record label right now. I was trying to explain this to my cousin I'm like, she's like, we are working so hard. It is insane. And I was like, we're in our indie
You
record label years.
you do in-person events. You know what I found is like really
I want
successful?
to.
You should. This is just like content craft hour now.
Hey,
But
it's good. There's a lot of people
yeah,
who like love these conversations because you and I talk a lot about the kind of inside mechanisms of this. And as we talked about on our last podcast, people keep this like weirdly a secret. Like they have to
I know,
act
it's like,
like, oh,
why?
this is all just happening. And you're like,
You know
it's a
what I
lot of
hate?
fucking work.
And I might have said this on the last time we talked about this. I hate when people are like, well, I just sort of accidentally fell into this and I didn't really want to. It's like, bitch, you worked your ass off. You sucked
Yeah.
so many dicks to get here. Like, who are you fooling? Metaphorically, they didn't the person I'm obviously referencing in my mind, it worked. They published, right? Like, no one falls in. No one keeps up a content creator career because, oh, it was just an accident. I never expected it. That I'm so humble about it. Like, no, you're just be real. You wanted it, you love it, and you worked for it.
Yeah. And it's not like anyone who does content creation knows what bullshit that is.
It's
Like,
so annoying. I
that
hate when people
might
say it
seem
to me.
real to people who don't have to do it because they're always like, "Get a real job." I'm like, "You know how many times I've joked to my husband that I was gonna go back to waiting tables because it's easier than like, this is amazing and it's creative, but, and we were talking about this on, ironically, a recent dumpster fire that, like, did the most poorly of one in a while, where we were talking about how we all sound like psychopaths talking about feeding the algorithm. I'm like, we sound like primitive people talking about the gods, like the way
Yeah.
we all talk about the algorithm is like, oh, if we don't feed it for 3 days, it will get angry. It will turn on us. We cannot anger the algorithm. We must keep bringing it offerings for it to keep paying attention to us, or it will rain hellfire upon it. It's just like no one really fucking knows. And now with AI, this invisible god that is driving it all, we sound like crazy people, but it is so much of what you're constantly trying to manage because all of these platforms are also constantly changing their algorithms with changing preferences and politics and ownership or whatever, and censorship rules or not censor it is bananas, and anyone who acts like it's easy is a liar. And I know all these dudes who are psychotic about this stuff, and they pay people to analyze every card that they use on YouTube. I mean, they are like autistic about YouTube and
Sure.
trying to hack the algorithm, trying to figure out what the new algorithm is. There are teams of kids in India who are doing this for every platform, looking at what works, when, it's like no one people are full of shit if they act like this just happened. It's
Yeah. I mean, and, like, even to the there are some creators that I can think of, right, who where they clearly did just get lucky, and they're not doing it on any kind of schedule. But then it's even like for them to have gotten lucky, like getting lucky means the right person noticed you. Even
yeah,
then, it's like you have to network, you have to say the right things. There's no version of this where you're just blessed by the creator gods and you're suddenly famous. Like you have to, drum up the right controversies. Don't piss off the wrong person because that'll haunt you
unless
for
you're like
life.
Hawk Tuah,
Oh my God. What happened? How did that even? She was like smart for a minute.
and then stupid or something,
Yeah.
or she's sitting on a beach earning 20%.
I mean, maybe. Or she's
Like,
the pending lawsuit.
I mean, look, if yeah, or that, or both. I mean, if I were her, I would just leave the country and go live in Sri Lanka. She She may have been smart enough to see that, like, that 15 minutes when you blow up overnight like that, it's not as easy to create content as you think, and to maintain relevance, you have to, that level of relevance, you have to live up to to that, and you might just wanna do a pump and dump and grab, like, 50,000,000 or whatever and get out.
Call it a day. Yeah, I mean, maybe.
That would be the smart thing, truly, for her.
Yeah, yeah, because it's like, how much does she have to say? You know? It's not like she's doing any kind of project. Yeah, just get your bag and walk away.
Yeah, when you're at your peak.
Yeah,
I mean,
and I
I
don't
was
think she'll
looking
be
at
forgotten.
no, I was looking at it was a moment. I was looking at her even podcast numbers, and you can see, like, just on YouTube, like, they just start slowly declining because you were a cultural moment and a flashpoint, but are people gonna tune in to you every week? I maybe, but it seemed like, I probably would've just grabbed the bag on as soon as I noticed that star was falling, I'd be like, "Get me out." But maybe she's just pending a lawsuit, and she's not
Could be,
allowed to talk it.
it could be both. Maybe it's both.
But
But I
this
do
is
think
that
it's a lawsuit.
that kind of viral fame, like, I've never chased it, I've never wanted it. It seems like it comes with so many more problems than opportunities in the long run, and it's, I kind of prefer the slow and steady, just, like, plot, on the internet, and it's weird, like, I don't know if you've had this experience at all with having a kid. W I don't wanna be disconnected from this world, the online world, because I know she'll probably be there, more than likely, as
Yeah.
most children are, but I don't want it she makes me wanna be even more in real life and even this thing, like, around reading books where I would love for her to grow up and be like, "My mom and dad were reading all the time," and I was saying to someone, even reading a Kindle, you're looking at a screen. So I
Yeah.
just like physical books anyway, but if you're trying to, like, teach your kid to be a book reader, you can't do it by reading a Kindle. They're still gonna be like,
You
"Oh, she's
absolutely
looking
can.
at a
Yeah.
screen."
Um, I don't know. I need to cut back on my online time. I mean, my son already sees it. I see him like picking up rectangular objects and pretending he's on the phone. He grabs my phone to call my mom, and I'm like, "You're 9 months old."
Yep. Yep.
Ugh. He's
Yep.
you know, he if I leave my phone unattended, he just starts moving around like this.
Yep. They
crazy.
know. They
And
see
they do.
us.
Yeah.
What's that expression someone said to me? "You're more is caught than taught." That really stuck with me. Like, the kids are gonna catch more just by our behavior than us being like, "You need to get off the screens and you need to read books," or whatever. It's like, if you're not, they see that. I see it reflected in her. And then it is hard because she has relationships with her grandparents who live all over the country, something that was not possible in a way that is now where they can FaceTime. And so she gets to see them, but it means more time on the screen. But when she sees them, they have this pre-existing relationship from their screen time, but she also knows how to swipe a notification away. At like 13 months, she knew how to do that.
Yeah. No, I mean, sometimes I'm like, I let my son FaceTime my parents too much, but also it's like now he knows he had such a good even this young
That's what
has
I
such a good
mean.
relationship with the grandparents.
Yeah,
It's yeah, I don't know.
it's tough.
I don't know how I feel about it. I definitely don't want him online ever. Um,
It's so I mean, if I were you, I wouldn't, and you're in way deeper than in the, like, dredges of the internet than I am.
yeah, I mean, I don't think the internet's inherently bad, but it's the wild west. Like my problem isn't mediated relationships. It's like I don't want him wandering around downtown Chicago, at 2 years old all by himself, right? Or 5 or 7 or 15. It's
It
it's
reminds me of that
same
Chappelle
idea.
Show sketch where he's like, if the internet was real life, and he's just, like, walking through, like, or basically, like, a red light district. It's just, like,
Yeah.
badness everywhere. Yeah, it's such a weird It's such a weird time. It really is, like, how you open this saying things are gonna get weirder. And even culturally, like, vibe shift or realignment or whatever you wanna call it. You already see the right wing behaving in the same way the left wing did, and that kind of, um in some respects, I see glimmers of this. I know a lot of it is just the victory lap. But some of it is also, I think there was a viral tweet I saw yesterday going around that was like, "Make it normal to shame someone for voting for Kamala." I'm like, Are we gonna do this again?" Like, that's
I
not
mean,
how
here's the
you won
thing,
the
like
independence.
so much of this stuff is like politics agnostic. It's like a group dynamic thing, right? And I've always believed that. I mean, there's the left certainly has its own toxicity, and I'm not denying that. But I think a lot of problems are because of power concentration, resource scarcity, like too many people wanting the same thing. And the same types of dynamics emerge. The internet amplifies this, but obviously they exist just as much in the physical world. And so, of course, we'll see cancellation mobs from the right because it was never it was never a principled thing. It was like, is it such a coincidence that the left went into turbo drive? They already owned all these institutions, and then these institutions start shrinking because of the internet, right? So
Right,
it's like some of it is political, sure, but a lot of it is not political and is driven by these structural problems.
right. It's do you think that do you what do you think about the TikTok stuff as someone who loves TikTok?
I don't know. I I've become over time more sympathetic to banning it. I'll say that.
Mm,
And I think a lot of the security concerns have become like more legitimate to me. And I think people were like, well, what about like Meta? What about every other single company out there, right? They have a point, but I agree. There's like a as gross as this is going to sound to say, there's like a qualitative difference between like Alphabet or Meta exchanging my data with other corporations, right, and selling me down the river with their algorithmic voodoo, and China doing it.
I
Um,
know.
and there is a difference, right? And I don't like to say it, but I mean it's just how I feel. But here's what I don't think is real, and what I thought was absolutely like cringe inducing is the idea that like TikTok is like digital fentanyl and that like it was brainwashing people when a lot of the trends that people pointed to were already in motion, right? Like people thought that young people were more anti-Zionist and pro-Palestine because they got brainwashed on TikTok. That's just not true. Gen Z has been moving in that direction for years. And if you look at the polling data, you see that. And maybe these surveys aren't right, but a lot of those Harvard Harris surveys that people were using in the early days to show um, how like deranged Gen Z political positions had become, and then like tying in TikTok as having caused that, they were like really flawed. The questions were weird. Um, the sample sizes were all over the place. They were like changing week to week, and there people were really cherry picking those surveys, right? So it's complicated. Like, yeah, there's national security concerns. I buy it. I get it. I think it's probably a very complicated conversation if we want to like start drilling down how these other tech companies are treating our data. Um, I certainly think that we're not the best at privacy in this country. But then like the brainwashing thing, it's not the fault of TikTok. I will accept and even promote a more general argument that people are in front of screens too much and like losing touch with their own humanity, and that causes problems, as we've seen with the you know myriad school shootings getting
Mhm.
increasingly stranger each one.
Mhm. Mhm.
And just other acts of just like completely antisocial behavior. But it's not TikTok, making 14-year-olds sympathize with Palestinians.
I mean, anecdotally, I have seen that to be the case, but that's just anecdotally. I do know people in my life where that is the only place that that information would have come into their brain with very little pushback. So, spreading, talking, having conversations with younger people around that age who live and die on TikTok, and there is not much, where some of it is just, clearly pro-Palestine and empathy for the Palestinians. Some of it is anti-Semitism kind of repackaged,
Sure.
but they don't even realize that it's anti-Semitic, so there's and this hasn't just happened to people on TikTok. I've also seen this with, like, grown adults on Instagram. So, I'm not sure that my particular experience with younger people in this topic completely is that I don't know where else a 14 or 15-year-old would get that perspective or that one-sided perspective. It doesn't seem like it's, like, balanced with anything, so I'm not sure where that comes from. Is it just, like, their school?
I I mean, I think it's in the water.
It's, like,
It's like
in
a
the zeitgeist?
cultural. It's in the zeitgeist, right? And
Yeah,
maybe TikTok reinforces it, but I don't think it caused it, right?
right.
But I
Yeah,
and I think it's like this complicated thing where it reinforced it because people already think this way. You know what I
right.
mean?
Mm,
Like like any media created by young people does have this sort of flavor that you're describing to it, and that predates TikTok. Like I don't think like
right.
TikTok entered the picture and suddenly everyone is a leftist. I think young people have been leftists for a long time, for decades,
Yeah,
and this style of leftism um, is, I mean, it's been growing year over year, and there's certain parts of the internet that amplifies it, but I don't think it's like the fault of one
right.
platform per se.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was interested in what were you gonna say about the live events?
Oh, I was gonna say, I think that's a good differentiator, and people are thirsty for them, and they're like a pain in the ass to put together, so no one does it really. Um, like I've had a couple of in-person events here in Chicago. I haven't been great about organizing them consistently because I, have the baby, but like I did like a poetry reading and people were spilling out the door to listen to poetry, right? And it wasn't like I didn't have like famous poets there. I had like, you know, two girls I liked and then like some guy, just like some guy. I'm like, you're cool. Why don't you join my event? But people just want this in-person, they want in-person stuff and they want like classes. Like anytime I do like a Zoom book club or something, people are like so stoked for it. Like to the extent where I'm like, why am I not just like running a local book club? It's like I've had numerous situations where it's like, I'll pick some book, I'll do my due diligence with advertising it, and then I pick a cafe, assuming 3 people show up, and then it's like a bunch of people, and it's like I didn't pick a big enough spot, right?
Uh-huh.
People love it. I think people just want to hang out.
Yeah. That's like the 90s girl in me that misses hanging out. I was thinking about this. I've been thinking a lot about just my upbringing and um, the living through, I don't know, it was just so cool. I went to so many cool things. I'm like, does this exist still?
Yeah.
I want to, does it, like, where is it? I want to, I need to find out where. I remember the first time I used to go to Bon Appetit in St. Paul, and Rhymesayers was just getting started. For people who don't know, it's like a hip hop label, indie label, but it repped all kinds of amazing hip hop artists from that time. And Slug from Atmosphere was not known or famous at all yet, and he would go and just freestyle, and there was breakdancing, and people were still spinning actual records at that time, and it was so much fun. It was like I think I was probably 17. It was the coolest. Are 17-year-olds going to places like this? I wanna know what they're doing. I wanna know, like,
I
these
don't
what
think so.
where are the cool in real life kind of indie things that kids are doing, and like, where are they gathering? I'm sure there's a scene in Chicago.
There might be. I mean, I don't know what teenagers in Chicago are doing. Um, but
Shooting each other. No, I'm just kidding.
maybe. I think there are scenes certain places in the country. I think more people are trying to create scenes too.
Mhm.
But I think it's like there's this like inequality. Like some people are kind of stuck online and they really resent the it's the phones, get off the phone discourse because they're like, well, you know, even if you're in like, even if you're like 60 miles away from or if you're in parts of Minnesota, right? It's like, well, where are you
Yeah,
gonna go? I hear people complain about Austin, right? That there's not enough going on in Austin. So it's like,
I
what
can
do
see
they
that.
expect kids to do in the middle of nowhere, right?
But
Maybe
also,
some,
we had the parenting is a little more strict now too, I think. So this is like
yeah.
another extension of a conversation that I've been having on this podcast for years, where they couldn't find us. Like, they couldn't track us, they couldn't find us. We would just, I think I had a pager at one point, and I would have to like go find a payphone to call my family back if they needed me, but I would go out and just be gone, and that was kind of it. My parents had to just trust that I was where I said I was. Usually we weren't. Usually we were at some party in the woods, or it was, I don't, it's just like a completely different time with the level of surveillance that you can have on your child now. And like Dana Lash
It's
and I
like
were
a mixed
talking
bag.
about, would you, as a parent, I'm like, uh, I don't know that I'd wanna let that go.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, because on the one hand, you hear all these horror stories, right? And some of them seem pretty legitimate. Like here's something like I would never give my son unrestricted internet access, even remembering things I got up to, right? Like, absolutely not. Um, and in today's world, it's like, well, just letting him loose in the physical world. Like, how do I balance that with not letting him loose in the digital world? Because they're so intertwined.
They
So I
definitely
think
are.
that's a big part of it. And then of course there's the reverse situation, which I hear about a lot, where people have no freedom in the physical world, but they have all the freedom in on their smartphones, and that
Yeah.
causes problems.
But it is true. Even if you restrict your kids online at home, my best friend has kids who are tweens, and she was telling me about the stuff that they're exposed to from other kids who are older, showing them these horrific TikTok video. It's like you can't guard them from it from the online, even offline. And it's
Right.
you don't also don't want your kid to be like a homeschooled kid that goes to a state college and loses their mind. You want
Yeah.
them to have some. This is another thing, my some of my family members have teens and older kids who have lived through all this, and the kind of like getting in trouble online and with friends and drama and all the stuff you go through with the kids now online with their friends. And the one of them was saying that he was allowed probably too young to be online, although he went through all this stuff much younger, and then he's seeing his friends going through these things like as freshmen, and he's like, I already went through this. I went through this when I was like 12. These kids, because they were restricted and they didn't have the
Yeah.
online social skills that are required, or social, or the online kind of, I mean, for lack of a better word, street smarts. There is like an online. It's funny to hear
Yeah.
you talk because you came up on the internet, and I had real life street smarts because I was like out at 17, 18 doing things I probably shouldn't have been doing and in positions I shouldn't have been in and were dangerous. And you have online street smarts for a similar reason.
I don't know if I have online I'm pretty I often say I have like digital autism. It's like my social ineptitude translates to the digital world somehow. I wish, I wish I was savvy. I don't think I'm savvy physically or in cyberspace.
Yeah, but you seem to you probably have a certain set of social skills and knowledge about these counter cultures and these small niche like fandoms that you kind of enter into that I would have. You know how to speak their language and you know how to navigate it. I would have no clue. I'd be like, "Hello, children," the
It's
meme.
tough. And it's a lot of young people are kind of, especially online, are kind of scary. The older I get, the kind of like scarier they get.
Why is that? Are they just
Like I was
losing
in
it
like
online?
so I wrote this very long article about people who it's the true crime community. So they're mostly people under 20, sometimes in their early 20s, who are in like a school shooter fandom. Like
Right.
Columbiners. And I'm just like looking at these like Discord servers that they're in, and they're just like blithely sending the most horrific gore I've ever seen. And it's like doesn't I don't think the gravity of what it is like registers to them, right? It's like they
Yeah.
really are numb to it. Um, and not in the way like you or I might be numb to like war footage or something because we saw it on the news
Mhm.
so much, or like natural disasters. It's not like the 24-hour news numbness. It's like another level of it. I'm like, that's strange. Like I really think it's not that they know what it is and don't care. It's that like they've seen it so much it ceases to register. Like it is
Right.
just an image to them. And that is scary to me. They're just so out of step with their own bodies, with the world, with what anything the meaning of anything. It's like really this sort of like postmodern nightmare.
Yeah, this is a lot of, like, what Mary Harrington talks about, our mutual,
Yeah.
just being disembodied, just the
Yeah.
but this is just an extension of mediation, this process too, because even in the book that Thomas de Zengo Tita wrote, Mediated, about, like, how numb my generation in particular was to, like, the starving kids in Africa, because were bombarded with those images of the
Yeah.
kids and the flies, and, like, you just get numb to it because and this is his whole kind of theory about the blob, is that it doesn't actually seek a reaction from you. What it seeks is apathy, because the minute that you can allow it not to affect you one way or another, it's been fully um like it's like osmosis. It's just been fully integrated, and you no longer the blob can like move on to the next thing, where it like seeks to erase wherever there's something that makes you feel and can penetrate it. and you have these moments that penetrate the blob, but then they're like memes are the digestive enzyme of the blob. It is like incredible how quickly people are memeing something, even if it's horrific. It's almost instantaneous. There is no such thing as too soon anymore. If there it maybe there never was, but that
Right.
distance is gone.
I totally agree with you. Like it's just so because it doesn't. There's no you don't feel it, right?
Yeah.
It has no context. There's no significance. I mean, it's just an image, or
Yeah.
it's communicating something other than what you would assume it communicates. Like
Mm,
communicates you're in a subculture, or that you have a particular style of humor, or that you're exclusive or something. And it communicates anything but what the image literally is.
yeah. What are your predictions for, like, this year moving forward, where you see the trends going in terms of you kind of think more consolidation, we'll see more consolidation, people
I think so.
rebundling,
Yeah, absolutely.
bundling
I
or
think
yeah.
I think like this year is going to be like you know how like at some point with cable, it was just getting like there's so many channels, right?
Yeah.
It's like we're kind of in that phase, right? Where it's like not everyone, like there's some barrier to entry, but there's still like a lot of choice.
Yeah.
And
I
there's just a
I I
huge
do
just
see
huge
that,
selection of
like, tweet a
networks.
lot. Where it's like, "So glad we cut the cord so I could be subscribing to 60 different, apps and,
Yeah.
like, HBO Max and Netflix and at 60 different networks and Substacks." So I think people are and I get this question a lot on Substack. People are like, "How do I subscribe to, like, more than one creator?" I'm like, "That's a
They want
Substack
to.
problem."
Right? Like they want to they want like clusters, right?
Right.
They want like a cable package,
Right,
you know?
right.
And I think like that's going to be the year that or this is going to be the year where maybe there's something like this happens, and I think like everyone forming these networks and these groups, or like, Substacks, like acquiring smaller Substacks. I think all of that is a positive signal for that. So that's one thing. I think there are too many print magazines. Like, we don't need another
Mm.
one, but people are gonna keep starting more, right?
Why are they starting them? What's your feeling about that?
Um, it's sort of a rebellion against the digital. Um, Something nice about it. It's less ephemeral, and I think also it's like a labor thing. Like, it feels good to contribute to a magazine.
Yeah, I mean, I have often threatened to quit my Spectator column for, like, I've been there 5 years, I think now, and now I'm really glad whenever I have something that I want my daughter to maybe be able to read, I will write it for the magazine column, because I know I've had all my work purged, like, writing online. I've seen entire bodies of work just disappeared overnight, and I know that that can be true with pretty much anything that I do online. So I think she stands a better chance of reading it if it's in print than if it's online.
I think that's true. Yeah, I mean, there's so many things disappear.
Mhm. My entire Playboy body of work is gone, and it was I mean, I have it because I had a feeling that it was gonna get 86th, and so we took screenshots and have the PDFs of all of it, thank goodness, or I would have none of it, but it was overnight gone, and it was 100 I mean, just like a body of work I was so proud of. It's such a weird time in our culture, and it's just gone, and it was so much work. Like, I was doing a column a week for years. So it was
Yeah.
it was a lot of work and effort, and it just gets washed away by the digital tide. You can go find it in the Wayback Machine probably, but I don't even know if you can because Playboy's paywalled now, so I'm sure you maybe can actually. but it's still like, who
It's
wants
probably
to
tough to
fricking do that?
find.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's wild. And that happened with my first website, my first iteration of Phetasy.com. Like, the server, my web designer moved to Puerto Rico, the server disbanded and moved to France or something, and I woke up and my entire blog that I'd been working on for years was just gone. Oh,
Sucks.
I still remember the, like, absolute it's like, I viscerally remember that feeling so well, even in this moment. I never even talk about it because it was so dramatic. It was like
That's
everything that I went bankrupt building this website, and it was all gone overnight, and that was my first real lesson in the, like, not it's because as an internet historian, it's a very weird thing where the internet never forgets, but it also doesn't last.
yeah, it's like an oral culture.
Mm,
Um, right? So it's a lot of
that's
this
so
stuff. A lot of
interesting.
what it's not forgetting is like stuck in people's memories, which is why it morphs,
Mhm.
right?
God, that's
You
so
have to
brilliant.
just accept it in the moment in a way. And a lot of the work I do is like I'm not often in like I mean it's impossible to go into like archives because there's all this context, right? And like the things that people say, right? So things that people post, if you don't know the mood and what's going on in group chats and what these things represent, then it's useless. Reading forums and stuff doesn't make any sense because there's all these other components that you can't that like really aren't that helpful. It can be a little bit helpful, right? But it's not just the work of finding broken links. You have to talk to people who are there. They're oral histories, right? They're not. It's not written. It's. I mean, it's like anything else. I mean, this is true of all types of historical work. But I think people don't realize it's also true of the internet because it's text based or video based. But
It's
like
so true.
yeah, you don't know what people's reputations were. You can't always access comment sections. There's so many components of it. You really just need to talk to a bunch of people who are there and then do the hard work of who's lying, what's true.
That's so wild. It really is. That's so interesting and kind of like uh just yeah, that's I've really never thought about it that way until you put it this way. Have you written about this?
No, I
You
don't know. I assumed it was like obvious or something, and like I haven't written
I know,
about
but
it.
I think you're so guilty of being so brilliant and having this kind of insight that's so simple and you think everyone takes for granted, and it's like not it's so obvious when you say it, but it's not obvious. You should write about it. Long story short, you should
I
write
I,
about
I
this.
will. I will write about it. But yeah, that's why
I
I
think you should.
interview people all the time, right? So I do these
Mhm.
case studies, and sometimes I post the interesting ones. I'm constantly talking to people about their internet usage, but it's because like I can't rely on my own memory. I wasn't there in all places at all times, but I just have to find the patterns, like what themes come up again and again and again.
Yeah.
Um, and it's without it, then it's like you don't really have context. Like you don't really know, and you need to constantly be talking to people and constantly looking at the notes. Otherwise, it's like you'll never know.
I did a podcast with 3 relatives of mine, and they were all probably around it was like 18, 14, like 11, 15, 19, or something like that. They were came up in this first age, and I never released it because they were minors, and I'm so glad I have it though, because we all looked at our screen time. Weirdly, the oldest one had the least amount of screen time. I think some of that is just personality. This is a person who's very ADD, I can't sit still, of this world, wants to be like out active. Um, the other one, second lowest screen time, more than even the adults. And this was because they are a gamer. So that was most of their screen time went to playing video games. And then the youngest had a pretty high, but that's a TikTok addiction. And I was thinking about this recently only because after the TikTok, you would think that it would be the kids, but the adults actually all had much worse screen times than the kids, and I was thinking about this watching all of these women I know posting these very dramatic videos about the 13 hours that TikTok was down, and these are women in their 40s, and I was like, "Guys, I get it with the kids, but I saw women in their 40s having train spotting, like, breakdowns when it
I
went
mean,
down."
nobody the Wall Street Journal just published something. I think it was the Wall Street Journal, or maybe it was Bloomberg, just published something about this. And then I actually wrote something for the Blaze about this a couple of years ago. Like we talk about kids having phone brain rot, and that's all well and good, but like there, I mean, so many like boomers in my, and even like Gen X, like
Gen X, yeah.
who listens to like the most like there's like scrolling TikTok or Reels without headphones, like my Gen X family members, and it's like in the middle of a movie, my dad when started, he's also Gen X, when started playing a podcast while we were all watching a TV show, just no headphones, but it's like
That's so
it's
weird.
everyone's addicted to their phones. It's not just Gen Z.
Yeah.
Millennials, I think, are as bad as Gen Z was. I mean, I don't really believe there's a distinction between Gen Z and millennials, or at least as sharp of a distinction as people want you to believe. This is something, speaking of Mary Harrington, that we're both strong believers of, that like there's such, what's the difference? Like if you were born in 1994, you're really not that different from someone who's born in 2000. It
Yeah.
just is what it's a false, it's a completely like made up differentiation. Your lifestyles are pretty much the same.
Yeah, it's weird. Be doing comedy, and these kids will be doing stand-up routines about how different their life. It's like they try to sound like they're Gen X, and they're like, "I'm a '90s kid. I was born in '93." I'm like, "You're not a '90s kid."
Hey, you're
Like,
a
what is
2000s kid.
Yeah, you're not a '90s kid. This is stolen valor. It's very unsettling, and they'll be like, "I was, like, smoking my weed out of a, like, an a" it's so disconcerting to me because 'cause I'm like, the internet compresses time in that way, where
Yeah.
every generation feels older, younger. Because of the internet making them feel old, because the internet is this, like,
Yes.
culture of youth, and so even, like, these 18-year-olds feel elderly because the 14-year-olds on TikTok are dominating the culture at the time, and they have all these new terms, and they look at 18-year-olds like they're elderly.
I mean, I remember feeling old at like 22, and I like kick myself. I'm like, why did like what the fuck was I thinking? I was like, oh, I'm so, like, oh, I hit the wall and I was like
Yeah.
25, and I'm like, and now that it really has come from, I'm like, well, I should have appreciated being 25 a little bit better.
I think some of that, no matter what age, it is that, like, youth is wasted on the young. I felt old at 21, 22. I'd also already been through rehab and had a kind of, crazy upbringing. I think normal kids from normal homes are feeling old, and it is, like, a very strange aging because of the speed at which the internet moves and evolves. And so I'll see all these, like, I'm like, the millennials are posting stuff that I'm like, how old am I? Because they're now the millennials are all like, I'm so old. I'm like, you're 30. Like, what are you talking about? You're
Yeah,
not
I mean,
old.
and I'm with you with the like stealing 90s valor. I mean, like that's I remember like thinking that, and I've done it myself, frankly, but like it's like I'll remember like one thing from like 1997. I'm like in elementary school, and I think that counts. It doesn't. But yeah, I mean, it was so like BuzzFeed would always have these um articles or like listicles like you're a 90s kid if, right? And I remember they were like in 2010, like authored by like 19-year-olds. And it's like, let's be serious. We aren't 90s kids. We remember the 90s. We had like the echo of the 90s in
Right.
2005. That's not the
Right.
same as it being the 90s.
No, it's really funny. It's cute though. I get it. I get it. I mean, I wanted to be a '70s kid, but I knew I wasn't. Like, we couldn't
Yeah.
get Quaaludes in
Yeah.
spite of how badly we wanted to. That wasn't something we had access to. Yeah, it's so I don't know, it's very I look at even all of these, people for all the stuff that they say about podcasting. I hope I hope it lasts because this is the oral history of this time, and I do love podcasts, and I love our podcast in particular, when I talk to you because it is like be I get to stop and just be like, "What the fuck is going on? And where are we right now?" And it's been the whole I've never so speaking of being a '90s kid, I know that things swing back and forth right to left, but never in my lifetime, and Meghan McCain was saying this recently too, has the right ever been cool. Like, that was
Yeah.
not a thing in my whole entire life. Maybe they won elections, maybe they had political power, maybe they had power in the Supreme Court, judicial power. Never have they had cultural cool capital. It's even like that New York Magazine title that was the cover that's going around right now, where they're like, "Oh, the cruel kids table," and it's like, "Well, this looks amazing." Like,
Yeah, they
to
look
the average,
cool.
it's like fun and cool, and like they're having a great time, and they're,
Here's what I don't
yeah,
understand. Why the assumption that they're cruel? You know what I mean? Like how they're no crueler than anyone else with cultural cachet. Like
yeah,
why do I just I mean it's a great title. I have to say it's
yeah,
very catchy, but like isn't it's like they're not they are mean. I'm not gonna pretend because I want to be in good standard. They're assholes, but they're not. I mean, everyone's an asshole. Everyone who's
yeah,
popular is an asshole. You know, I mean, it just
yeah.
is what it is.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. It's a we're living through a moment, and because the young people are seeing this, yeah, this is the thing that I will be very interested to see how it plays out in the next 10 years, 20 years, because never before has there been a young like you said, most young people are leftists. This is maybe the first time in history that they're not, like
Yeah.
in America, I can't it's usually like that joke, "You're left wing when you're in your 20s," and I was just texting with somebody last night about how I'm so glad that I did my 20s as a lib and my 30s as, like, an independent, Like, I'm glad I got to be the wild kind of it
Well,
lib
I
in
mean,
my
here's the
20s.
thing. These rightists, these young rightists, it's like, I mean, this is a critique that gets levied all the time. It's like they're right wing in sort of a different way, right? Like they might, want mass deportations, but they're still like, sexually lascivious and they do drugs. And I can't believe I use that phrase. I'm not actually passing judgment on the sex they have. I don't give a fuck. But like, they're cool if they're trans friends. It's like the they, them, MAGA. So you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
it doesn't really they're
them.
still being young people is my point, right?
Yeah,
They just
yeah.
they're kind of they're slightly yeah, it's just like it's just different. But it's not like they're not like Alex P. Keaton.
No. I just like how you're like, "They might want mass deportations, but they're still doing drugs." And I'm
It's true. Maybe they don't like weed. I think they mostly like weed, but they're still gonna do coke in the bathroom.
Yeah. Yep. I think Coke is my prediction is that Coke is gonna make a big comeback.
Okay, but the only reason coke so ketamine eclipsed coke is because there's fentanyl in the coke and
I know.
you can order ketamine from these DTC services and it's like they're not
Yeah.
going to give you Fent. So
No.
maybe Trump will make Coke safe again.
No,
Not that
this
Coke
is
is
what
ever
I've
safe,
been
but
joking about on stage. I said if I was Robert Kennedy, that would be my platform is like, we need to get the fentanyl out of the coke and the heroin. Cause I
I
joke
mean,
about this. I'm like, back in my day, you could do drugs for decades and hardly anyone died. Like that's when you could be a
I mean,
heroin addict.
honestly,
You could be a junkie for literally decades.
and you'd
Decades.
be, I don't want to sound like I'm promoting people, doing drugs, but I will say that like, uh, I've known a lot of people who they've gone out to party and it's like they're not they're just, and they died. Like I know
I
more than
know.
one person in that situation.
Yep.
And I mean, that is a real and I think like the argument is like I can hear it in my mind like, well, they shouldn't be doing it at all. Well, you can't control that, right? So let's
Yeah.
look, how do we make it safer?
Yeah. Yep. Gotta make America healthy again and make the drugs clean. This is my platform. What is your biggest defective character?
um,
I
I
always ask these questions.
I was caught off guard. I'm wishy-washy. I think I've contradicted myself several times on the show, and in fact, I was planning on texting you. Did I contradict myself?
Whoa, I have 2 sets this week. No, you did not contradict
Congratulations.
yourself. Thank you. I get so excited. It's, like, so funny. Um, I you did not contradict yourself, and even if you do, it doesn't matter because I contradict myself all the time because we're talking that's like
It's a
when people are like,
conversation.
"You said this, then you said that." I'm like, "Yeah, because I'm human." People I'm not and I'm not autistic. Autistics are pretty good about maintaining, like, a clear line of thought that I feel is like, Helen Pluckrose is so ethically, she's so sound ethically, like, it's like she's meticulous. I am
Yeah,
not meticulous. I'm fucking
neither am I.
incoherent.
I'm all over the I'm just like, I don't know, and it's like I keep, like, memeing myself into different beliefs, and it's like, I just need to accept that I'm just exploring. I just like to look at all this stuff.
Yeah. Well, you're a journalist,
Yeah,
so you're curious.
I am curious, and I'm
So what's
impressionable.
your defective character that you're too all that you contradict yourself or and that you're all over the place or that you're
Yeah. Yeah, that I'm all over the place, and I'm impressionable. Like, if someone, like,
mm.
sells me something and they believe it, I'll be like, "Well, of course. This person gets it."
You're so I like if I ever have a baby, I love that I'm like, my plan is to like acquire you. Like if once someday if I have an empire, I'm gonna make you an offer you can't refuse. Because I think you're truly one of I just love and appreciate you so much. You are true. You're really an original thinker. I know you're impressionable, but because we need people like you who are taking in so much. I learned so much from everything that you write. It's always very original. It's just
Oh,
not,
thank you.
I just appreciate your voice and the culture. I hope no one, um, I hope I love your perspective. I love your all over like I love you. I love your all
Oh,
over the placeness and I think that it's something so necessary right now to have somebody just kind of wandering around trying to make sense of it all and interviewing people and doing weird things and looking at niche, fandoms and having conversations with Claude. I like Claude.
I like Claude too. I feel like Claude, if Claude was a person, I think of him as he would be very handsome. But anyway, thank you. I really appreciate that. I'm very
What's
touched by that.
what's your biggest asset? And everyone should follow your Substack. You put out stuff for free, right?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah,
Put out something free
okay.
today.
I'm not hallucinating then. I never know. I don't even this is how irresponsible I am. I never know who I'm paying for and not. I'm not sure if I'm even paying for you, but I will be if I'm not. So I'm always like, is this free? Is this paid? I'm like, how do I do this for a living? And I have no idea what I'm
Oh my God.
like
I was
getting.
subscribed to like 40 Substacks, like 40 like $5 Substacks, and I had to like unsubscribe. And I wrote all these heartfelt messages like, you're doing great work. Please stop, capitalizing articles because like that's, don't capitalize the if it comes in the middle of the headline, but I love your stuff. Like I'm just constant. I had to write like 10 of those today about how I love, I love you, but I was spending like $200 a month on all these Substack. Uh,
At the beginning of the year, and now I've started noticing this as someone who's had a subscriber platform since like Patreon, I guess since 2018. I'm like, oh, it's the January dip. Like
yeah.
everyone's like, I'm getting my shit together financially. I'm unsubscribing from all of these Substacks. And you see this like dip, and then it's slowly like, or maybe that was just me, but that's been my experiences in January. There's always like a bit of a purge as people are like, I'm getting it together.
Yeah. So your question is what is my asset?
Yes, your
I
biggest
think
asset.
because I'm not ideological and I will hear everyone out probably to a fault. But many good things come of that too, because I think like people tell on themselves, right? Sort of the cynical perspective that is so, for better and for worse, I think I can get a sense of who people are.
Yeah.
Usually for better.
That's what I mean, your internet street smarts.
Yeah, I hope so. And I was reading back an interview to yesterday. It was so crazy. I'm excited to release it. But speaking of people telling on themselves, this guy was really like really. It was just so clear. It was just so full of shit. And I'm excited to publish it.
When we stop recording, I'm gonna have a conversation with I'm gonna talk to you about someone. When we stop
Okay.
recording, my audience is gonna be like, "That's bullshit." Who's she talking shit about? It's not talking shit, but it was somebody that I was like, "Whoa." One of the tougher interviews I've done. All right. Well, where can we find you?
Default.blog and default_friend, on most platforms, but especially X or Twitter or whatever you want to call
I vacillate.
it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for having me.
The check-in with Bridget and Cousin Maggie can now be found at PHETASY.com. It's been titled Another Round with Bridget Phetasy, and it's now in video.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.